Time for a massive list. We got 10,000 tremendous Togo coasters. A very terrible alliteration by me. I was thinking like, let's see, you could do 61 totally tubular Togos or like toasty Togos or something stupid. But I just went with the stupid hyperbole and said there were 10,000 of them. But no, there are actually 61. I'm pretty sure 61 because 61 never opened. So there'll be coasters that we know barely anything about. There's like unknown coasters on here, just everything you'd ever want to know about Togo, which is a company that I've always been pretty fascinated with. Very interesting, Japanese manufacturer from like started in the 50s and they went bankrupt in the early 2000s. So very interesting stuff. Like after they started doing stuff in the U.S., that's when things started going downhill for them. Very interesting. But we'll talk all about that in this video. It'll be a real nice long video for you guys, and let's just get it all started with first coaster they ever built, and also the first coaster in Japan, or well, this is the current oldest coaster operating in Japan, and it's this little, it's definitely more of a family coaster. It's a quick little ride. Theme Park Review has some videos on it, and it looks like some fun. I mean, there's some sharp drops and hills upward, and you might get some airtime on the tops of the train, the extreme end of the train. But really, it's just this cool old roller coaster that goes through some buildings and does some interesting things. It's just called roller coaster. It's interesting. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about it. It's interesting place for Togo to start. It doesn't look like a Togo necessarily, but it looks like an old Japanese jet coaster sort of thing. And speaking of jet coasters, there's a whole bunch of them from Togo. They made a whole bunch, and they all kind of look the same, and they all do the same thing, which was these wide not unbanked turns, slow flat turns, and some like weak hills that maybe provide airtime. There's one jet coaster that has a nice hill, but this thing's got two lift hills, so it's a pretty long ride, almost 5,000 feet long, but it only hit 34 miles per hour, so not really anything too crazy. Just a old-fashioned jet coaster out in Japan. Unfortunately, it closed. This is at Tokyo Dome City. This is the park that currently has Thunder Dolphin that opened 6 years after it closed. They also had a whole bunch of things like Linear Gale at this time, like toward when it closed. You had an Ultra Twister at the end, and we'll talk about all that later, the Ultra Twister. All right, speaking of some jet coasters, they also opened SL Coaster sometime after 1953. This is just an estimate. As you can see, it's over water, which is freaking cool. It's kind of more of a mine train than a jet coaster. You can see the trains are like, a train, an actual train not really the craziest ride of all time, but it's interesting uninspired layout with the oblong helix and just strangeness. That's why Togo's so cool, because they're so quirky, so awkward, and just very unique. And this really accentuates that. And this is still operating. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. I'll just check on my phone here really quick. Let's see. RCB. Let's see. SL Coaster. Let's make extra sure for you guys. I don't know why I didn't quite include that. It says here. Oh no. It was closed in 2011, so big bummer. It was a 2.5 minute ride, but some very interesting things were going on in this layout, and it's cool how it went over some water. So yeah, Cyclone at Toshimaen had one airtime hill. That's why I said some airtime, and there is an airtime hill that looks like it provides some floater, maybe even ejector if it's strong enough. Who knows? There's also this radical tunnel that turns like super hard into the tunnel. It's pretty cool. They got log trains, which is really interesting. And it's at Toshimaen. You can still ride this thing. It's very strange. It's blue. It's a jet coaster. You can see it from the picture. It's very strange. Very, very awkward jet coaster from Togo yet again. It's cool stuff. Jet coaster, another one at Nagashima Spa Land. That's right. And this one is still operating. It's basically Cyclone except lamer. Doesn't really do a whole lot. Just kind of sits there, looks pretty, has the minecart trains. Doesn't do a whole lot as far as airtime. Has one flat section where it looks like it should do a splash track, but it does not. You can see that on RCB. RCB is like my reference for a lot of these. There are sometimes when I go even deeper than RCB and find, I'm trying to get an image for every coaster, put a face to the coaster, So yeah, moving on. Diving coaster at Grinpa. That's all we know about it, that it's called Diving Coaster at Grinpa. Yeah, they currently have, this is like 2005, but they opened a coaster probably to replace it, Ultra 7 Coaster Mach 7, which is pretty weird how they spelled out the word 7 and then they didn't after that. It's very strange. But yeah, that's that. And Ultra 7 Coaster Mach 7 was not made by Togo, but it's this weird, like, sort of mine train like coaster that I don't even need to go into it. It's just weird Japanese coasters that are very intriguing. Also, you got Diving Shooter at Itozu no Mori Park. This closed in 2000. We don't even know what year it opened. We have no clue, really. Um, but yeah, this is just another jet coaster. As you can see from this image, not a whole lot going on there. A real nice lift hill. Goes through some trees. That's all I can really say about it. There's no point of views. Yeah, it's just kind of an unknown Togo that a few people got to ride before it closed in 2000. So, cool stuff. And now, starting in 1973, opened the first of 3 Bobster Clones. This one opened at Takakanuma, Greenland. There's a reason why I haven't been pronouncing these park names. But yeah, it opened and it's this very compact layout. It doesn't really look like a Togo. It looks more like a Pinfari that just sits on a field for 20 years. And that's what it is, really. It just kind of turns around, does some cool little turns, some minor banking. Kind of reminds me of a knockoff Zamperla Windstorm to me. I don't know. There's probably some point of views out there. I don't think I ever watched one just because these rides are pretty small and not very intriguing. But 3 of them were opened. There are 2 in Japan. One of them still operating there at Shirakawa Resort Family Land, and also one open in Cuba. Montaña Rusa at Park Lenin. They have a standing but not operating Chinese knockoff loop screw in their park, which is very interesting. But yeah, they also had a Togo Bobster clone for, like, I don't know, 25 years. So that is pretty cool stuff. But moving on, we can talk about the first Ultra Twister, which opened sometime like after 1978, but it's probably during the 80s, where it opened at Ikoma Skyland, and it's there on the bottom right. That's it at Ikoma Skyland. It was called that because it was so high in the sky, and you got a great view of the city behind you. It was really cool. Unfortunately, that place closed all their coasters in 2006. They had a few interesting coasters there. I can't pinpoint a lot of them. I can't remember these Japanese parks too well. I don't think anybody really can, but yeah, it was the first of the Ultra Twisters. I'm sure you guys have seen point of views of Ultra Twisters. These things are awesome. They have like an almost 90-degree drop, a vertical lift hill where it like it's yeah, it's hard to explain, but it does some awesome heartline rolls and twists, and it's really great. But it was interesting about this one. It was relocated to Kuwait in 2008, I want to say, and it was not maintained very well. And in 2012, it stopped operating there, and it's kind of sat there for 4 years and was torn down a few years ago. I'm not sure if it was 2016 and 2017. Nobody really knows because nobody really goes to Kuwait to check out roller coasters. They go to Kuwait because they live there. So yeah, not a whole lot of people travel to Kuwait to ride roller coasters. So fun fact. But some people did, and they got pictures of, like on the top right where the dust storms and stuff infected the trains and made them look terrible. And I don't know why you'd ever want to ride that, but some people did in 2012. So there you go. Moving on, another coaster we don't know anything about. There was a jet coaster that operated at Yatsu Yuenshi. I believe this park's still operating. I don't think I need to tell you anymore. There you go. We don't know what year it opened. We know what year it closed. There's that. God. Moving on, Momonga standing and loop coaster. This is at Yomiuriland, which was the second stand-up coaster of all time to ever open. The first one was, of course, the Worlds of Fun. What was it? Extreme Roller, right? Extreme Roller. They put stand-up trains, or no, it was their mine train. I forget what their mine train was called, but they put stand-up trains on their aerial mine train, and it was just very interesting and very weird. But this one was unique in that it has a sliding station. Okay, you had a stand-up train and a sit-down train. It's still operating. You can still ride this sit-up train and a sit-down train, and the station will. It's like, imagine Mr. Freeze. You know how there's 2 trains in the station, and the station they can move the track to align with the lift hill, and you can choose what kind of train you're going on. It's pretty cool. And it was the first Togo to ever go upside down. So I mean, I'm sure that Ultra Twister I already talked about opened after this, but yeah, it was the first to go upside down. Really, the entire layout is just the turn into the drop into the loop, and there was a little helix and then brake run. There was like a probably 20-second ride, very short ride, but very unique and very weird. So interesting start for Togo's inverting career, I guess. And I should tell you, let's see, looks like the mine train it was on. Let me try and find this for you guys here. Um, yeah, I'm gonna go on actually. I can find it. Yeah, Extreme Roller. They put stand-up trains on it in 1983, so that's pretty interesting. And actually, Ace RCB says Ace has the American Coastal Enthusiasts. They have the stand-up trains still in storage today, so you can still find Aero stand-up trains. They do exist. All right, moving on. Was the first of the Togo looping wild mice. It's opened at Tobu Zoo Park, and it pulled 5.1 Gs in that loop. And apparently, the loop was very smooth and very good. Unfortunately, it closed in 2009. This is the park with Kawasemi, and actually Kawasemi opened in 2008. So for 2 years, they had an amazing top two with this awesome Crazy Mouse and the Megalite. Obviously, they also have Regina at this park, which is the Regina George's Mean Girls roller coaster that Rob Alday was talking about a little while ago. That was amazing. And at the very end of the ride, there are these great little 2-foot tall airtime hills that are total memes and totally awesome. And I just love these Togo looping wild mice. I don't know why they ever took off in the U.S. because we all know what happened with another coaster that I'll talk about later, I guess. Moving on is Loop and Cork, which was the first corkscrew looping wild mouse and the only wild mouse to ever have a corkscrew. You can see it pretty well on the top right and bottom left images. The top right was its first location, which I believe it stopped operating toward the end of the 2000s, like 2008 or 2009. And in 2010, it was relocated to a field in Indonesia where it sat there for 4 years. Because, Indonesia, why would they want to open a loop screw wild mouse? I don't know what they were thinking, but they ended up opening it. They renamed it to Bledek Coaster. Not sure what that means, but Bledek might mean lightning because in that logo there's a lightning bolt and interesting stuff going on there. But yeah, as you can see, it's still got the loop on the bottom right and the corkscrew loop screw wild mouse. There's a point of view of it somewhere. There's point of views of it as its original location and at its current location. The original one are the high quality ones. And so if you're curious about what's up with these layouts, and you can also see the 2-foot tall airtime hills on the top right image. On the bottom right of that those are some 2-foot tall airtime hills. Very cool stuff. Moving on is another Crazy Mouse, another Togo looping wild mouse, which originally opened at Nagashima Park. Nobody ever saw it, but then in 2000 it was relocated to Katame Family Land, where it still operates today and has this very cool color scheme. It's probably the least known of the crazy looping wild mice, and very cool. It's just like all the others, really. I'm pretty sure it's just like the Tobu Zoo one, but we all know what happened to that. I'm pretty sure this is the one where you go through a cat. There's like a wooden cutout of a cat, and you go inside the mouth of it, and it's a crazy mouse because you're the mouse and you're getting eaten by the cat. It's a funny thing. Okay, moving on. Was Tornado at Shirakawa Resort Family Land. They also had I forget what else they had, but they had another coaster I already talked about. And they had Tornado, which closed in 2004, but it's still operating today at Haimji Central Park. This was a Togo looping double corkscrew. Pretty sure, was it just the double corkscrew? Pretty sure it was the double corkscrew, and you can see it pretty well here, how the corkscrews were banked very strangely. There are point of views of this, I believe, and they are very weird. But it's still operating today. Haimji Central Park, that's the park with the Japanese Batman clone. The black one, it's pretty standard looking Batman clone on a field, but very cool that it's still operating. You can still ride a double corkscrew made by Togo, so that's awesome. Moving on is Dangai at Thrill Valley, which is a terrain single looper. It's a pretty low quality image, but you can get a good idea of how well this thing followed the terrain. Didn't really do a whole lot besides follow the terrain. Didn't really do a whole lot of airtime. Had that awesome vertical loop, pretty like a bigger vertical loop than what you're used to seeing with Togo. It looks like there's a pretty nice point of view of it somewhere. If you look up Dangai Thrill Valley point of view, there's a nice low quality, low res POV. But of course, there's that turning drop there into that vertical loop. Just a very cool looking ride on that mountain. So yeah, not a whole lot to talk about. Loop Screw at Siuben Yunchi. This is the reason why I don't pronounce these names. I already said that. This is a loop screw just like Tornado that we already talked about, or Hurricane. And this one does have a loop for sure. I couldn't recall if the double corkscrew one before had a loop or not. I feel like it didn't for some reason. But this one does, and it even has track that threads the loop, penetrates it, as the encyclopedia would say. Yes, it goes over some water there, but It closed in 2013, so you can't even rent it anymore. But I believe TPR got a nice point of view of it, so you can probably check that out somewhere. Moving on, there are two coasters that opened sometime around 1982 in Japan. We don't really know about them. They all closed. I don't know. I remember when they closed. But the point is, this is a jet coaster, and it is very cool. Let's try and find what year these closed, because I'm pretty sure they closed. Yeah, they both closed in 2005. So all these images are pretty old, like 20 years old. And yeah, just kind of a jet coaster, a smaller one, doesn't really do a whole lot, but it looks a lot more like a Togo instead of the other ones that had the old barely even Togo looking track, just like old steel coaster like looking track. So, but jet coaster wasn't the only Togo they had, because on the left there you can kind of see Crazy Mouse. That's right, they also had a looping wild mouse that wasn't experienced by many, but the color scheme is probably one of the best around, with the mint green and pink track and supports. But just an amazing combination. I wish more coasters had opted this. And it looks like it was just the standard Togo Wild Mouse with the loop into a Wild Mouse portion, and then some interesting turns and the 2-foot airtime hills. So cool stuff. Moving on is the definite first Ultra Twister that's opened at Nagashima Spa Land in 1984. It was all white, and it was pretty disgusting to look at. But in 2012, when they decided, you know what, we're going to build a massive kiddie area, they relocated both their Ultra Twister and the corkscrew that you can see on the bottom right. They relocated both of those inside the park to a different part of the park, so they could build this massive kiddie section. And during that time, they repainted their Ultra Twister to red and yellow, and it's the one that you've all seen point of views of today. And it's pretty rad. It's just like every other Ultra Twister. It does the awesome heartline rolls and that airtime hill after the drop, and the awesome drop, and the backwards heartline rolls. And we've already talked about it. It's just amazing. I can't wait to ride an Ultra Twister someday. Who knows? Maybe my parents are talking about Japan trip. Who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I'll do that for my senior trip next year. That'd be really cool. Maybe I'll go back to Europe. I don't know. All right, moving on. King Cobra at Kings Island. I think the craziest thing is the top right image. How you had Son of Beast and King Cobra operating that like right next to each other for 2 years. Like that was it's just weird. Just because you had this totally horrible, like almost a knockoff wooden coaster. It seems like right next to a Togo. I think that was just man, must have been an interesting time. This was the first purpose-built stand-up coaster, so it was like all stand-up. It wasn't like, oh yeah, we're gonna add stand-up trains to our sit-down coaster. This was just all stand-up coaster, and it was marketed as the world's first. Even though, I mean, not technically, but it was the first purpose-built stand-up coaster. Had the pretty standard layout that was copied like 5 times. I got to talk about it just because you'll see it 5 more times. It had that nice flat turn, a very slow lift hill. I think there's like Shockwave at King's Dominion had a meme about having a really slow lift hill. It does have a really slow lift hill. It takes like a minute and a half to get up it. But after that, had a nice drop into the loop and a nice helix. Actually, a really good looking helix. And actually, the way into the helix, the transition into is a really nice airtime hill. It looks like it has some solid airtime, some stand-up airtime, maybe even ejector. Who knows? And after that, you do a hill, do some nice trick track, and then you just kind of meander around, do some mini hills that don't give you any airtime. Very short layout, but very simple, very cool, very weird. I love Togo. All right, moving on. It was unknown at Otaru Expo, but we know it today as standing coaster at Rusutsu Resort, which has a bunch of Togos. And yeah, it's basically just the exact same thing as Momonga standing loop coaster at Yomiuriland that I talked about earlier. How it's just the loop, the turn drop into the loop into helix into brakes. And I'm pretty sure this is the one with the really really awkward banking at the bottom of the drop. It does this weird shift in track, and it looks really terribly rough. And man, this would suck. And it also has the sliding dueling station, so it's really just a clone of Momonga standing in loop coaster. Moving on is, of course, I said I was going to talk about it later. This is Tokyo Dome City's Ultra Twister. It's opened in 1985, closed in 1997. I originally found a point of view of this. I was like, whoa, awesome. And this is the screen cap from that point of view. Pretty sure it's the thumbnail of the video. So if you ever see this around, you can look up Ultra Twister. Tokyo Dome City had the sky blue and the white track and sports. Pretty cool. And I guess it sat like a small section of the lift hill, like the staircase. It sat there for like 10 years. Very interesting. And I believe it sat when Linear Gale sat. Don't quote me on that, but 1998 was when Linear Gale opened. I'd imagine that replaced it because they're both just like one straight line layout, so it makes sense for them to replace each other. Very interesting. Linear Gale, if you don't know about it, you know about like Wicked Twister, Cedar Point, or like whatever other like V2 your impulse coasters. Well, this is an impulse coaster that didn't twist at all. It just launched and went up a vertical spike. Didn't twist, wasn't interesting, no holding brake. It just kind of sat there, went back and forth for about a minute, and it was pretty lame. But hey, it was unique at the time. It was the first impulse coaster, and everybody's got to start somewhere. So that's where Intamin started with their impulse coasters. So that's interesting. Moving on is Starjet at Tsukuba Expo, but we don't care about that. We care about where it is today. It's at Brazilian Park Washuzan Highland. This is that mega rusty Togo looping coaster, similar to that of King Cobra, King's Island, or Shockwave, or Skyrider. We'll talk about all of them. And yeah, this one's known for being rusty. What's interesting about this one, it does not have the sliding dueling station like you know, but it operates with two different trains. It uses the backwards train for a little bit, I think from 1 to 3:30, it says there on RCDB. And so forward stand-up train for 2.5 hours, but the rest of the day, the backwards train is used. Backwards sit-down train. So you can either ride it stand-up or backwards sit-down. Really, really awesome. Unfortunately, still 1 credit, but still really awesome. You can have different experiences. So that's a really cool thing. And I really hope to get out of here before this thing closes, because we all know Japanese parks never have people there. I mean, really, like every train you'll ever see of a Japanese park, there's like 2 people riding, and it's really depressing. I can't believe these parks are still operating. But yeah, moving on is Skyrider at Canada's Wonderland, which unfortunately closed in 2014, but to everybody's surprise, it was still purchased, and it's still operating today in Italy as freestyle. That's right. So there's that nice big field in the middle of Canada's Wonderland. That's actually the new B&M dive coasters being built there right now that they're teasing for, which is pretty freaking sweet. But yeah, there was a field that kind of sat there for 4 years unused. That was where Skyrider sat. It was this weird orange and dark green, horribly colored Togo stand-up. And, you know, so just like King Cobra, it had the trick track instead of the hill, because, like, I'm pretty sure Starjet, actually. Starjet did have the hill instead of the trick track. Didn't talk about that, but this one still had the trick track, and it was still really weird. And it's still operating today, actually. Opened 3 years ago as freestyle, and that's at Catalina Mato. Very weird that it's still operating, and it looks really nice, actually. They get given a nice new paint job. Green trains and the like almost mustard yellow, lime sort of yellow track. Pretty cool looking, though, and it's cool it's still operating. So moving on, Ultra Twister at Six Flags Great Adventure. That's right, the Americas did have an Ultra Twister for a little while, and if Six Flags wasn't so ignorant, we could probably still have this coaster still operating. So the story is, it opened at Six Flags Great Adventure in 1986, operated there for 3 years, kind of sat around. It was replaced by another Togo we'll talk about later. But in 1990, it was relocated to Six Flags Astroworld, of course, the Houston Six Flags that closed in 2005 for no reason. But so it operated there. It was repainted to blue and green for the last 2 years of operation. Very cool looking ride. And then the park closed, and I was like, geez, what do we do with this thing? It still operates just fine. We should move it to Six Flags America. They haven't got a coaster in a while. So they moved it there. And it's like, yeah, 2006, it was moved there. They saw it. It kind of sat there for a few years, like all the tracks still sitting there. But unfortunately, it was damaged beyond repair. Six Flags was just kind of screwing around, and they screwed this thing up a whole bunch. And I guess it could never operate ever again. If you check the Google Maps, the Google Earth like historical street view, you can see that more and more pieces of Ultra Twister have been removed over the years. There might still be some blue supports there, which is interesting, so that there are still traces of the American Ultra Twister on this Earth. So that's interesting. There you go. Very cool that there was once an Ultra Twister on American soil, and it was probably the best American Togo ever created, of course. So moving on, Shockwave at King's Dominion. We talked about the other stand-up loopers, and this is another one. It was at King's Dominion. It only closed 3 years ago, and it's just like King Cobra or Skyrider, but there was no trick track, so there was no extra painful moment. And it had that really nice airtime hill that probably didn't provide much airtime. Instead, it just kind of did a hill, didn't really provide much. But these are probably the best coaches around for stand-up airtime, just because of that nice moment after the loop. And as you can see, its original color scheme was that, or no, it wasn't its original. Its original was like pretty sure like an all white or something like that. It was not very pretty. But then for its, I want to say its 20th anniversary, probably not, maybe its 10th, 15th. They painted it that weird lime orange blue, and it was disgustingly interesting. But then the one we all know and love it as, it was the lime green and turquoise supports. the Shockwave that is, that's the one that it was torn down with in 2015, unfortunately. So big bummer, but I don't think we're really gonna miss it. It was replaced by Delirium. That's probably a better ride, honestly. And I'm not even really a flat ride guy, but really, it's probably better than a Togo stand up. So anyway, moving on. There was another Togo corkscrew that opened in 1986. That was at Beijing Amusement Park, and there's a point of view of this somewhere. TPR had one, and man, the banking on those corkscrews was really wonky and weird and wacky and crazy, and it was just a really interesting ride. And I've already talked about them. Togo corkscrews are a no good. Now, here we go. The main event. The best Togo ever created, probably Bandit at Yomiuriland. This was almost a hypercoaster. It's actually 170 feet tall, but the change in elevation is 256 feet. It goes 68 miles per hour. It might as well just be a hypercoaster at this point. It looks like a hypercoaster. It has a layout like a hypercoaster. I call it a hypercoaster. It's it's over 5,000 feet long. I already said 68 miles per hour. It's very speedy fast. It is a monster of a Togo, and it is one of the best Togos. So the layout by memory starts off with that nice banked high speed turning Rob Elvey quote. And I should mention it has over the shoulders. Why? I don't know. It's got log trains too. Who knows why? Okay, it's called Bandit. I don't know why it's called that, but the point is it's Japan and they do what the hell they want. And so after that nice high-speed bank turn after the drop, which is an alright drop, there's some airtime in the back row. There's this weird, crazy, like 720-degree helix that is pretty intense when you enter it. Kind of, loses its intensity as you go up it. And then there's some really interesting turns and some solid airtime hills towards the end of the ride. There's a really nice big drop where it goes 68 miles per hour. That's kind of why I feel like it's a hypercoaster, just because it goes so fast toward the end of the ride anyway. It feels like a hypercoaster for sure. Very unique ride. There's a mid-course brake run that's never on as well, so you just get some crazy airtime as you drop out of it. So that's awesome. Very awesome ride. This is probably the Togo I'd most like to ride right now, even the Ultra Twister. Those are up there too. The dive loop Ultra Twister we're talking about later. Very cool stuff. Moving on is another unknown coaster that I kind of have to talk about just because it's Togo. It's one of the original 61 that opened. Cool stuff. Closed in 1988. It was a Jungle Mouse, just like a typical wild mouse. We'll talk about some more of those. Anyway, here's another Togo that I don't really know a whole lot about. We know exactly the years it opened and closed, but we don't really know if this is even the right coaster. This is the coaster that kind of appeared when I looked it up. Kind of makes sense to me, I guess. Togo that, it looks kind of like it could be a Togo, right? It looks kind of like the Yomiuriland jet coaster that closed in 2011. I don't know. But it's definitely a very small one. Anyway. Go-Go Sneaker, here we go. This is a Togo Wild Mouse that we know about. This is, like the kind of thing that Jungle Mouse was. And it is a very cool ride because the sneaker trains, Go-Go Sneaker, Go-Go Sneaker, Rob Elvey. Yeah, I'd be so happy in that train right now, man. It's like you're riding a roller coaster in a shoe. That's just amazing. It's just a wonderful thing. And I'd probably make so many metaphor jokes that are terrible, but awesome. And this is a great ride, great meme that nobody ever talks about. There are a lot of these because Togo's crazy. So, this is at Rusutsu Resort. So this is the same place. They have the dive loop Ultra Twister that we'll talk about. They have the clone of Momonga setting a loop coaster with the sliding dual station. They have a shuttle loop from Meisho, I believe. You can see it in the top right of the left photo. Cool stuff. Moving on is an unknown Togo that we don't know a lot about, but it was pretty big, actually. We don't know. We haven't seen any images of it. We know what year it opened, 1990. We don't know anything about when they closed or anything, but there are a bunch of these fantasy domes. All right. This one we have a lot of stats about that Togo probably released. You can see it went 56 miles per hour. This is indoor. Keep in mind, 2,500 feet long, 150 feet tall. That is a seriously serious indoor coaster. Fantasy Dome. That's an indoor coaster, all right. And it was a 50-degree drop angle, so that's a serious ride for an indoor park. Very cool. And I have no way of knowing what the layout was, unfortunately. So, moving on. This Milky Way at Greenland. This is a dueling Togo, another dueling Togo. There's one in America that opened that was a total failure that we'll talk about. But yes, this is Milky Way at Greenland. Very unfortunate. Not unfortunate. That's the American one. This is a very fortunate one in that it was a successfully dueling roller coaster. So it's successfully dueled. Had some awesome dueling moments. They went zoomed past each other, and it was really awesome. And yeah, one side's a stand up, one side's a sit down. The stand up side is the blue side. Pink is sit down, and I think the stand up side is better. It was recently included on the best coaster in 1991 video. Didn't get a whole lot of votes, but the point is it's a stand up coaster and it's awesome, and there's some airtime, which is really cool. Probably the best stand up airtime you could still ride, because Cobra at Laurent was shut down. That Cobra at Laurent had one insane stand up airtime moment, so that's pretty cool. And apparently in 2007, this thing got new trains with onboard audio. So if you want to ride an onboard audio stand-up airtime Togo coaster, this is what you got right here. So yeah, cool stuff. Another Ultra Twister opened at the same park with Starjet, that rusty Togo. This is a pink and white Ultra Twister that everybody kind of forgets about. Probably the most forgotten Ultra Twister that's still operating. Yeah, it's that one lifeless forgotten Ultra Twister. I didn't even read that, and I still said that. So that's kind of cool. All right, yeah, there you go. Moving on is the unknown clone of Shockwave, or not Shockwave, clone of Skyrider and King Cobra, because there is no trick track. This is interesting in that this is recently discovered that it was relocated inside Russian parks. It originally opened around 1992 at Metalworkers Palace, but it was relocated in 2001 or 2002 to Maviland as Actpo Cometa, probably something like Comet or something like that. And you can still ride it. There's off-ride and on-ride point of views of this still today. That's how I got this image screen cap. I don't monetize my videos, so I mean, it isn't a huge deal, right? Anyway, but yeah, trick track instead of the airtime hill. Just the exact same ride. Although this one is a sit down. Keep that in mind. This is a sit down, so it's like Starjet at Washuzan Highland with a trick track. So like you can ride every variation of this ride still today, which is great. So moving on is, oh yes, the classic Fujin Raijin 2, 1992 to 2007. And we all know why it closed in 2007. This thing was going to live on for many, many, many years, like hundreds of years. And this was a great setup at Expoland. It was known by Rob Alvey as Togo Death Machine 2 because there was a 2 after some Japanese words. That's what it said, Togo Death Machine 2. And the unfortunate thing was, this actually was a death machine. The layout was just so stupidly mindless and dumb. It was 3,500 feet long, but it had no airtime. It just meandered. The only element I can recall is just this helix that didn't really do a whole lot. It was stand up. And basically the story here is the ride derailed in May 2007. The wheel axles were never replaced, ever. They weren't expected since February 2006. And the ride decided to derail one day, and it killed one lady riding. A bunch more were injured, and it was an unfortunate thing. And it kind of woke Japan up and said, oh, geez, we should probably do some safety things with roller coasters. And that made Expoland close. Expoland, they had the B&M invert that we know today as a monster. It was called Orochi then. It was a pink and white Raptor clone at Cedar Point. And that was relocated to a park in France, and it's still operating today on a field, and it's kind of interesting. Very interesting looking ride. Pretty solid B&M there too. It's interesting that this park had that, and that's why it exists in France today, because this thing derailed. So cool stuff. Moving on is Zola 7 at Fuji-Q Highland, which unfortunately closed 8 years ago. But Namco, these people made like Pac-Man and Galaga and awesome classic arcade games that at least I've played. I don't know about you guys, but my dad forced me into playing those classic games. And they're pretty great. This is a shooting dark ride at Fuji-Q Highland, and we all know about Fuji-Q Highland. We'll talk more about a ride from them, or a Togo coaster at Fuji-Q Highland later. But yeah, they had this great indoor shooting dark ride with over the shoulders, because Japan is obsessed with over the shoulders for no reason. And this ride had over the shoulders, and it's pretty interesting. Can't really tell you a whole lot other than what you're seeing right here. It was an interesting theme. You shot. It was by Namco. Cool stuff. Moving on. Geopanic at Tokyo Dome City was another over-the-shoulder indoor thing, but this thing had a tire lift hills, and they were the tire lifts were so fast it might as well have been a launch. I think one review said, Richard Bannister, when he wrote it. This is at Tokyo Dome City, same park as the Ultra Twister that was replaced with Linear Gale. They also have Thunder Dolphin, the Intamin. They had it. They opened in 2006, I want to say. But anyway, yeah, Tokyo Dome City, very interesting ride. Had that. It was like just weird, like weaving in and out of structures indoors and buildings, and yeah, Geopanic. I seriously don't know a whole lot about this thing because it was indoor. That's the thing about indoor coasters. It's like you can say the ride is great and all, but you really know what just happened, which is why indoor coasters are so much cooler. It's like Skull Mountain is like, it's probably pretty terrible if you put it out on it like outside, but because it's inside, it's just so much more mysterious. Has an awesome drop because you don't know what's about to happen, and then you get dropped, and it's awesome. And I'm sure Geopanic was the same way. So moving on is Super Roller Coaster Dios, which operated for only a decade at that one park. And we have like 5 images on RCV about it, and it looked kind of like a jet coaster that I'm more, well, just a really interesting layout jet coaster sort of thing. Did some interesting things and had a weird name. I don't know what DIOS is supposed to mean, but they put that at the end of the name. And yeah, it's a roller coaster in Japan, in the Tokyo area. I tried to find Google Maps images of it, Google Earth history image of it, but could not get any of that. I'm not that sneaky. Yeah, see, that's how much research I did for this, guys. All right, come on, spent so much time. Aladdin Coaster at Aliba City. This was a thing I don't really know about, other than that the park was operated by Togo, so you could imagine how amazing it must have been. But yeah, only operated for 5 years. It's called Aladdin Coaster. I don't know why. We don't know anything about the coaster, but yeah, it existed. Next was Surf Coaster Leviathan over at Sea Paradise. What a beautiful looking ride. The blue and white color scheme. Just really, really cool. Very weird layout. It had some massive helixes. I call it the helix machine. Look at that. It has a 900-degree helix there in the bottom right. Totally awesome. And then toward the end of the layout, there's a 540-degree helix. So that is just absolutely an amazing ride. 4,200 feet long. Seriously amazing Togo. So happy it's still operating over at Sea Paradise in Japan. Yeah, like all of these are in Japan, pretty much. So, and speaking of Japan, I said I'd talk about it. Here's Rusutsu Resort, the dive loop ultra twister. There is no like transfer track sort of thing at the end at like the halfway point of the layout. This one just goes straight into a dive loop, puts you upside down, flips you around, and you do the like the rest of the. It's really hard to explain. You kind of have to watch a point of view, but basically you haul ass through those final Heartline rolls, and it's definitely the best ultra twister. It is the ultimate ultra twister, or the ultra twister, whatever you want to say. Yeah, basically it's like, ultra twister without a mid course break run. So there you go. Just amazingly awesome. There's awesome TPR videos on it. Awesome stuff. Now here's another one of those fantasy dome rides. This one is probably the same size as the last one, but this one actually inverted, and it's indoor, and it's very weird. Moving on. Hey, another one. Yeah, there are two of them, as you can see. Yeah, we don't know anything about these. There are no riders of them on Coaster Count. I'm sure there are some Japanese people who can recall some things, but that's what's interesting about these Togos, man. We don't know when it closed. We know when it opened. I don't know. All right, now we got another Ultra Twister over at Greenland, opened in 1994. This one has the rainbow color scheme. It goes like the red, orange, yellow, and like all the way down the rainbow. End of the ride is like a bluish, purplish sort of deal. Really awesome. This is at Greenland. There's like a bunch of awesome. They have Milky Way. There's a bunch of awesome knockoff coasters here. They have like Gao, this awesome like dinosaur sort of thing. Weird jet coasters. Just this is like the epitome of weird Japanese parks. Really want to go here someday. Anyway, moving on. Here's Clipper at Space World, which unfortunately closed just this past year, New Year's Eve. This is really just the Togo equivalent of a Vekoma Junior coaster. I mean, look at it. It just kind of meanders around, doesn't do a whole lot. That's a Vekoma Junior coaster. Pretty cool. Moving on is Cycle Coaster at Inakyo Wonderland, which I'm really not sure what was going on here. There was a lift hill, but is this the kind where you do the bicycle things? I don't think it is, but it's called Cycle Coaster. This park has a cycle coaster, is why I'm thinking about that. That's probably why. Yeah, very weird. Anyway, moving on. We got Koinura Legion, and they opened this unknown coaster. And it's celebrating today as Jungle Coaster at Inakyo Wonderland. So the same park as this one. And it doesn't really look like a Togo. It looks like some kind of other weird Japanese manufacturer with an uninspired layout. But yeah, it existed, and it has a very interesting. I'm guessing that's a squirrel on the train. As you can see, there's a rider with a face mask on, one of those things, and a tail at the end of the train and a face in the front. So very Japanese, very awesome. And it's called a jungle coaster, but there's a squirrel on it. So I think it's like a flying squirrel, like a jungle mouse flying squirrel, something like that. I don't know. Here we go. Another American Togo, a big failure. I love it. Six Flags Great Adventure. This was the predecessor to El Toro. They built this thing in '95. Had a really interesting like Wild West sort of theme. Viper. It's cool. And had that really cool like Mexican sort of Wild West station. And it was the first coaster to really do a Heartline roll that wasn't an ultra twister. Like it was like actual track and did a Heartline roll, which was pretty cool at the time. It was like, whoa, Heartline roll. Unfortunately, the ride quality was really terrible. It was like a 30-second ride. All it really did was that really wonky inversion that you can see at the top of the layout there. It was like this weird, like I can't even explain what was happening. It's kind of like a dive loop, but it's like a flying snake dive. But there are point of views of it. Those do exist, and it's just a really wonky ride. And they put these weird circles around the track for some odd reason. They made it look pretty interesting, unlike any other coaster anybody had ever seen. And unlike really only one other coaster, there is still an operating coaster that has the weird circles on the train, where like basically the other kind of ride that's like this one, which we'll talk about pretty soon. I forget exactly when, but here's Fujiyama at Fuji-Q Highland. This was the world's tallest coaster when it opened. That's right, Togo was in the big leagues here in 1996. I was like, holy crap, 260 feet, that's insane. This thing is like Magnum on steroids. It's like, it's wow, this is incredible. And it kind of was, actually. It had some pretty awesome stuff. Really weird layout, though. Started off with that really nice big drop and the flat turn for some reason. They had to make a really high turn for some reason. And then did a whole bunch of airtime hills, some nice big turns. But towards the end of the ride, there are these weird, these weirdly banked rough hills that just totally make it an ungood ride. Like some weird track profiling that just is not very enjoyable at all, probably. But hey, you can still ride it, and it's still the tallest coaster at Fuji-Q Highland by a little bit. It's Asian Icon now, which is like almost as tall. But anyway, still an amazing ride. Probably one of the best Togos to ever open. Very cool. Moving on is Rushing Car. Speaking of amazing Togos, this is a mini Wild Mouse that they opened. Only operated for like, what, 8-9 years. And yeah, it existed. It's sat in a parking lot there at Kashiken Yunshi. I'm really good at pronunciations. There you go. I know Bannister wrote it, and it says Russian Car above the station, so that's cool. I love it when coasters do that, like a really obscure coaster still have the name, you know, like posted in big words. I just like that for some reason. Anyway, here we go. Another main event in the Togo video is the Big Apple coaster. I've talked about this before, but we all know what this is. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. If you've been to Las Vegas, you've driven down the street and you've seen the New York Hotel and Casino Manhattan Express Big Apple coaster, also known as roller coaster, and Manhattan Express, and a lot of weird things. It's a really weird layout. It's actually a hyper coaster. It's 203 feet tall. Originally opened with Togo trains, but when too many people complained about roughness, they put on Premier Rides trains, which are just weird as hell. Look kind of like backlot stunt coaster trains, actually, but they're on a Togo, which is just the weirdest thing ever. And very recently, they added VR headsets that, like, why would you want VR on this thing? Are you kidding? But yeah, they did it, and you can ride this thing with VR now. I forget what the VR even is. I think some people have ridden it. I really don't remember. But yeah, really weird looking ride. It has. I see it had because it kind of has the vibe that it's closed down and it's failed. Because I mean, really, it kind of is a failure of a ride. The ride sucks, and they should replace it with like an Intamin or something. But no, it's the last Togo still operating in North America, unfortunately. And it's just the wonkiest ride of all time. Has that vertical loop and then a dive loop. Probably a really unique dive loop in that it's like a straight track up, and then it twists you right at the end of it. You're upside down. You kind of hang there for a sec, and then you do the dive loop down. Really weird. There's some really like really horribly like long hills that it's just a complete mess of a ride. Moving on is Mega Coaster at Hamanaco Pal Pal. This is the Japanese Veta version of Manhattan Express, and this one has the full Heartline roll. So like Viper, this one also has the circles around the Heartline roll. Really great. Actually, TPR posted a point of view of this yesterday, which is really interesting. It's very weird. The ride ends with this insane like 900-degree helix where it banks super far, like almost 90-degree helix. Like just imagine doing a helix, but you're almost 90 degrees facing down. Like that would just be incredible. Moving on. Windjammer Surf Races, the epitome of Togo failures, aka God. This thing is God. It is the dueling, looping Wild Mouse. Knott's was a total legend for opening this thing. It barely even opened. It was supposed to open 97, never really opened. Just kind of sat there. In 98, it kind of opened off and on. The red side more than the yellow side. There's only point of views of the red side. But there is some footage somewhere of the yellow side also operating. But these rides were just, it's just so freaking weird. There was this helix at the end that led into a turn on the red side that would just knock you into the hard plastic restraints, the really beefy, bulky restraints. Like, why would you want that? Why make a looping wild mouse? I don't understand, Togo. It's just such a mess, these rides. And I guess they stalled a whole bunch too. In like 5 mile per hour winds, they'd have to close this ride just because of how much it would stall. Like toward the meandering parts of the ride after the vertical loops, it would be like really slow and weird and just a complete mess. And Knott's Berry Farm sued Togo. I guess they did not win the lawsuit, although they should have. They had to buy replacement parts a whole bunch of times. And the ride closed in 2000 because it was a total mess. And in 2001, it was being demolished. I know Sean Flaherty got some nice video of this thing being demolished from the Sky Tower. So that's pretty great. Moving on is Kiddie Shuttle over at Odaku Mukagaoka Yuan. I had to do it. And today, you can still ride it at Parc de la Vallée in Japan. Not Japan, in France, as Le Grand Canyon. Because that is, of course, the Grand Canyon. That thing is an amazing kiddie shuttle coaster. And that's what it is. It's just it's a shuttle, but it's for kids. So that's totally radical. That's really awesome. Thanks for watching. Just kidding. There's one more coaster, or a few more coasters. Here we have Hyper Kid Coaster. Oh, yes, this is at a Fantasy Dome park. So it wasn't any of the Fantasy Domes that we've already seen, but it was a Fantasy Dome park, and it was a wild mouse. I guess it's been steady. Yeah, it's still steady when operating, and it exists. It was really weird. It was a Hyper Kid Coaster. It's weird in that it was elevated above everything else. It was like a one floor up from above the rest of it looks like a mall area rather than a theme park. It's probably like a dome inside of a mall is why it's called that. But yeah, it was just an indoor wild mouse that did some really weird stuff, just weird uninspired layouts that Togo said, I'll just draw some random lines and like use some coat hangers and figure out what the ride is going to look like. Anyway, and the last Togo ever made was Flounder's Flying Fish Coaster at Tokyo Disney Sea. Thank goodness. Thank goodness we'll have a Togo that'll operate for a very long time, because we all know that Disney coasters tend to operate for a long time. This thing, I'm sure it will. It actually had a good layout because Disney knew what they were doing. They decided to contact Togo for whatever reason, who had just failed with Windjammer Surf Racers. But, I mean, it's pretty hard to screw up a junior coaster, and they did fine, and it still operates today as Flounder's Flying Fish Coaster. So, that does it for the Togo video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. It was a really nice long video. Pretty quirky, pretty weird company. And yeah, I just want to thank you guys for supporting the channel. Cool and review should be soon. And I'll see y'all later.